Good morning. My name is David from 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. After a handful of visits to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through a couple ward visits, and then as a Protestant going to General Conference, by far the number one top request this channel that I've received has been to visit a temple during an open house. Now, if you're like me and you're not LDS, I'll try my best to explain. Temples are considered by members to be the most sacred structures on earth. Whereas with the churches or wards are usually designated for Sunday worship and activities where visitors are welcome, temples, on the other hand, are only permitted by faithful recommended members to perform rites or ordinances. However, when a temple is newly built or newly renovated, the church will open it up for the general public to do tours. So recently this summer, the church held an open house for 2 weeks at the newly constructed Bentonville, Arkansas temple. So I was looking online trying to figure out if I could make it work, and I got an online ticket, I want to say maybe like an hour or two before they closed the open house. So my understanding is this temple will now be dedicated as a house of the Lord in a couple months. So if I can get real and personal for a moment, the lead up for this visit, there was a very strange spiritual component for me on this. And as I do Latter-day Saint videos, I get cautious. For me to buy into something, it takes a lot of research and understanding before I deep dive into something. And I often worry, like, I don't want to be this continual tire kicker. Like, I'm happy with my current church, and it's like I don't have any plans to change. That said, I can't help but have an immense admiration and respect for Latter-day Saints. And for myself, the thing I'm constantly going back and forth with is a very strange spiritual aspect. In other videos, I kind of mentioned this strange cardinal coincidence where cardinals are very rare where I live, but they often appear at just coincidental times, and that has been very significant in the past with my Latter-day Saint visits. And that happened again leading up to this temple visit for myself. So to set the scene, when I was driving out to Utah, I had a very good Latter-day Saint friend who recommended that I listen to President Nelson's biography. If you're not a Latter-day Saint, President Nelson is the modern-day prophet among the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I learned that he was a pioneer in open-heart surgery, and it often goes through how he was able to kind of build up this machine, and the survival rate among those that underwent the surgery got better and better and better, to the point where the survival rate got up to 98%. Well, around that same time, I learned that my dad needed open heart surgery. And at first, that type of news will probably scare someone. But after listening to President Nelson's biography, knowing that survival rate, I didn't have any fear about it. Like, I felt very calm. And with my dad, it's like I love my dad, I care for my dad. We just never really had that father-son bonding connection. We never really had any type of real discussions. And as I finished up 52 churches in 52 weeks, this summer I've just been trying to reconnect with friends, get plugged into a church, revisit family again. And I visited my dad just to say hi. We usually never really sit down and talk, but for this one day, we did. And, we're talking about his recovery. I'm talking about some of my church visits, and then I brought up Latter-day Saints. My dad says this, did you know your great-grandfather was Mormon? And I just looked at him and was like, what? That got me on this track to understand family genealogy and ancestry. I've never cared for this before. And I was talking with my local ward missionaries, and they let me know they actually have a room dedicated for family ancestry. So I went to my local ward a couple of weeks ago, and they got me in contact with the sister who was in charge of this department. And another coincidence happened where the same sister that gave the talk when I made my week 13 visit talking about narcissistic abuse, how I was having all these coincidences with cardinals appear. She was the same person that was in charge of this. And she showed me and got me on the right track. I even found, I never knew who my grandparents were. I just knew one grandmother. Everyone else had passed away. But with this family search website, if you remember, you could see the ordinances. And it was just so strange to see my grandmother, her name, I have her information, and it's I see the date, the temple for the baptism for the dead. And they were explaining to me how that all worked within the temples. And then as I'm driving out, I haven't seen many cardinals at all since I finished up my 52 churches in 52 weeks. I'm on daily walks, I'm driving every day. It's very rare to see one. And then a minute after I drive out and get on the road, I have a cardinal swoop by. And it's just what is this? I'm embarrassed to talk about it at this point because I go back and forth. Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it not? Is this just some crazy loopy Yahoo on the internet just talking about silly stuff? I don't know, but it just keeps happening. And that has further accelerated my curiosity into Latter-day Saints. And with this temple visit, all that going on in the background, I was really invested to learn more. So I made the visit, I made the tour. It wasn't very long. Usually in this part of the video, I like to show you what worship or what it looked like inside. With temples, you are not allowed to take photographs or videos inside. The only thing that they usually do is they will have images and videos that are provided for media outlets. So I'm going to include some of that footage in this next part, but I'll be back in a moment to share my thoughts on what I thought about this tour. Where to start on this? I have been paralyzed in thought as to what to make of this visit. And that seems to be a common occurrence with any of my videos related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whether it's a visit to a ward, general conference, and now a temple. There was a part of me that felt like I was walking into the twilight zone because I'm going into this temple that you're not typically permitted entrance into. But also just the fact that this felt like a throwback. This felt like a flashback to the past where there was this strong example of faith and family that it was multiplied. Like I see that example, from my background, but not to this extent. With a tour, like it was only 10 minutes of a video, and then the tour itself didn't even last 15 minutes. This video may end up actually being longer than my tour experience. And with the building itself, I've seen other temples outside, like San Diego, Salt Lake City, Washington, D.C. In comparison, this didn't blow my socks off. And we actually had to wear booties. So I guess the right way of saying is this didn't exactly blow my booties off. But the example that was exemplified throughout, I think really, really impressed me. And I'll try and do my best to explain that. And I'll break up this video, I think, in maybe 3 parts. 1, the emphasis that I saw that really spoke to me most. 2, the actual temple visit. And then 3, my wrestling as a Protestant of the idea of temples. So to begin, the thing that I felt that was most emphasized, that was most promoted, that was most advertised was this bundle package of Jesus Christ, the nuclear family, and the church/temple, I would say. Because I was really amazed at just the example and the amount of families everywhere. I got my online ticket. I saw a lot of the tours were sold out. I thought this was going to be more geared for the general public. But there were so many true blue Latter-day Saints that were a part of this. Many were wearing their Sunday's best on this Saturday night. And I can't help but be impressed by the amount of energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm, and most importantly, this was an example. I see that from my background with Protestant families somewhat, but not to this extent. This was so multiplied. And I couldn't believe the amount of families that were taking pictures in front of the temple. I think the thing that I felt most impressed with was the amount of smiles. And I felt like I was walking, like I mentioned, I felt like I was walking into the twilight zone. This was a flashback. This was a throwback to simpler times, like white picket fence, American dream. There's a part of me where it's I don't belong here. And then there's the other part of me where it's maybe I'm not actually walking into the twilight zone. Maybe I'm walking from the twilight zone. Because from my angle, I'm in my 30s, I'm single, no kids, there's this prevailing idea that because I'm single, I don't belong in church. I don't really bring anything to the table. I think a lot of people look at me and it's what's wrong with you? So a part of me with all these church visits is I avoid that type of paranoid feeling in my own head. So if you are a Latter-day Saint, if you are single, if you are divorced, I can see pressure when you see so much focus on the family as a part of this. But from my angle, I'm coming from this society where part of my foot is in a Protestant world and the other foot is in the typical society world. And I just see so much societal decay. And a big part of that is just, especially in the last 10, 15 years, has just been this consumer approach, this addiction to our cell phones. One thing in the news recently is they're going to reboot Snow White. And there's been a lot of chatter about that because the actress who plays Snow White is kind of talking about, Snow White doesn't need no man. And it's I look at that, I'm you're completely missing the point. In today's society, it's the evil queen. The queen keeps looking at her magic mirror trying to get validation. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Like, she puts all her stock into her beauty. So the moment that she loses that, she falls apart. And in today's society, we have replaced that mirror, mirror on the wall with our cell phones. And we're constantly looking into our cell phones, whether you're a guy or you're a girl, trying to build up this validation, whether it's through social media likes or erotic content for most guys. And it's like we're constantly searching for deeper purpose, deeper meaning. We are always looking into our phones for individual happiness. So from my world, I just see so many of my friends having gone through divorce. Oftentimes people enter into this current dating pool, and it's a literal dumpster fire, because everybody's been hurt, everybody's looking for red flags, and everyone has this paradox of choice. Like, what if I choose this partner, but someone else better comes along? What if I choose this partner and it goes like it did last time and goes through the divorce and all this trauma and pain? If I choose this partner, I could have had a better career. And everyone is just juggling this to the point where it's about the individual happiness. Here, with the Latter-day Saints, I'm seeing a big difference, because it's a family happiness. So the entire idea of eternal families blows my mind, because I'm so used to seeing that individual happiness, even like individual relationship with Jesus Christ, trying to get to heaven. So to have eternal families, like, this is where the Twilight Zone, the do 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 is kind of like playing in my head as I see all this. So when I walked in the temple, like, a part of me is like, is Rod Serling in here? Because this is completely foreign to me. To recap this visit, the very first thing you notice is driving in from the highway. You see the temple from a distance, and it's completely different than anything else that you're going to see. My understanding with LDS temples is they try to draw inspiration from the town itself. So for the Bentonville, Arkansas temple, they took this neoclassical architecture of a local county courthouse along with this colonial revival style hotel. And then with Arkansas, there's a lot of smaller towns. So they're trying to bring that charm all together with the temple. As I got closer, I was shocked at the amount of cars in the parking lot. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier, is just the amount of families taking pictures outside, the smiles, this togetherness that was outside. But one thing that immediately bothered me at first was I saw a number of, I want to say 2 or 3 gentlemen holding up these signs at the exit. And the signs read "Sacred" or "Secret." So immediately I'm associating them with what I saw in Salt Lake City at General Conference, and I saw this toxicity among street preachers who were insulting Latter-day Saints as they were walking in and out of the conference center. I'm like, well, I gotta talk to these guys. So I walked up to one of the gentlemen and I asked him, what's the deal with the signs? And to my surprise, he was very, very kind and humble and gracious. And he had caution about Latter-day Saint claims when it comes to eternal families and celestial kingdom and all that kind of stuff. But he wasn't there to bash. He wasn't there to yell. He was there for fruitful conversation. And I really appreciated that. One of the things that really confused me at the tail end of our conversation is he gave me this book from Spencer Kimball called The Miracle of Forgiveness. And I had heard of the name Kimball before. And so when he gave me that, I was a little confused. And I had to research who exactly is Spencer Kimball. And my understanding is he was, I believe, the 12th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So when I learned that, again, why? Like you're telling me one thing about, you don't agree with this doctrine, but then also on the other end, I'm getting this book from a Latter-day Saint prophet / president. So I was really confused by that. But with the tour itself, I got inside and there were 2 sister missionaries. And we were gathered in a room of about, I want to say 50 people. So they just engaged in some small talk, kind of asked where everybody was from. And then they played this 10-minute video. And the video, they had the beauty of the temple that they spoke about. They talked about Jesus Christ. But the thing I remember most was that example of families. Because anytime that they did a little interview, it was always with this family together. And there was one part where they're talking with, my understanding is it's Elder Holland. And Elder Holland talks about eternal families. Like he can't imagine heaven without his wife. And I recently learned that Elder Holland his wife actually has passed away. So looking back now at that video, that hit hard looking back at that. And, a part of me too is kind of praying for Elder Holland, especially in this difficult transition. We finished up that video and we walked outside, and the sister missionaries kind of let us in. There was a bunch of younger, I don't know if they were missionaries or just young people, but they all fitted us with booties. So we weren't tracking in the elements into this brand new state-of-the-art temple. We walk in, kind of looked like, a hotel lobby at first. And you see this picture of Jesus Christ, kind of like this shepherd picture. And for the tour itself, I didn't have a tour guide. It was self-guided. So there were a number of volunteers who just kind of pointed you in the right direction where to walk for this tour. So we went through a bunch of dressing rooms. I guess that's kind of where people start off walking into temples so they can change their clothes into the all white garments. And, as a Protestant, wearing all white, that seems very different to me, to have everybody inside wearing the same type of clothing like that. But the thing I came away most impressed with, and it was early on, was just the baptismal font. My goodness, was this just gigantic and grandiose in scale, because on the bottom of this baptismal font is you have 12 huge oxen holding up this font. And my understanding is it's supposed to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, but also supposed to represent, God's work being held and being strong. And as I further kind of walked through the different hallways, just seeing all this architecture, all this, the paintings, I think really spoke to me most as I was going through this. Now, because I didn't have a tour guide, I didn't really understand a lot of the significance of the different rooms that I was going into. I had heard of instruction rooms. I had heard of a celestial room. There was one room that had this this chandelier that just was so bright, so heavenly. And my understanding is, I think that's the room where you just kind of sit and you contemplate as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I also saw a ceiling room. So I guess that's where eternal marriages, eternal families have these ceilings together. I've heard from Latter-day Saint friends of mine where, there's this stillness, there's this quietness, there's this spirit inside the temple. I didn't get that feeling, but that's mainly due to the fact that there were so many people around, so many people kind of talking with each other and observing. So from that aspect, I couldn't get that being inside. And next thing I knew, that was kind of the end of the tour. So without having anyone to talk about or understand the significance, I saw it. It was like a quick orientation to me on this. Now I've been to one. Now I kind of have some more questions as to everything that I saw and what the meaning behind all these different rooms mean. When I first learned about temples from an LDS context, it was a complete opposite fit to my Protestant understanding of it. I always associated temples with an Old Testament way of works, especially associated with animal sacrifices, to reconcile our sin with God, because it dates as far back as the Garden of Eden. You have Adam and Eve, you have different trees and they pick the wrong fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. As a result, they alienate their relationship with God. And what happens is the very first thing that they notice is they realize their tutti fruities are out, right? So the very first thing that they do is they try and cover up. They try and cover up their sin. They try and cover up their guilt and their shame with fig leaves. And I heard this recently from, I want to say it was Jonathan Pajot. And he really kind of hit home the understanding I had with this, because with fig leaves, it is such a pathetic attempt to cover yourself up. So what does God do? He puts it upon himself as a gracious God to find garments of skin for them. It's essentially the first animal sacrifice. And throughout the Old Testament, you have man, they're building up the temples with the Israelites, and they are continually having animal sacrifices, blood shed, works done to reconcile that relationship with God. And it's never enough. No matter how many perfect animals or near perfect animals that they can find, and the smoke keeps rising to the heavens, it never works. But it foreshadows the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate lamb with Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is put on his own tree. The own tree that we mutilated, we made it to a weapon of death with the cross, and through Christ, we were finally atoned. So there was no more need for any type of sacrifice, and there was no more need for any kind of temples, because what you learn, especially with Paul's writings, is through our bodies, we are now God's temples. So how can we use that to exemplify Jesus Christ, to show that Christ-like behavior? So the entire idea of temples, to me, that's kind of where grace versus works kicks in. And like I've learned, it's not necessarily works, I think, that are with the temple from what I've learned, but I still think that way. So it's like, am I missing something? One thing I've mentioned very often in my Latter-day Saint visits is I can't help but realize the fruits. What are the fruits? Well, what I found interesting with Lehi's dream is he picks the right tree. He gets the right fruit. And what are the fruits of the Spirit? So what? You got love, joy, compassion, peace, modesty. There's several more I can't list off the top of my head. But I feel like with fruits, one of the best way of showing that is through the family aspect. Because so many families who are strong together, like the statistics are showing that it's much better for children to be raised with a father, with a mother, to have two parents within the household as opposed to having it break. And I can't help but feel that when I look at divorce rates, the stat you often see is 50% of marriages end in divorce. With Protestant evangelicals, the divorce rate is also 50%. And coming from a Protestant background, one of the frustrations that I've been having is, why aren't we any different than the rest of the world? Why can't we make marriages work? Because we have the truth. We should be able to be an example to show the fruits. And then when I see Catholics, I think their divorce rate's like 20 to 25%. Latter-day Saints, the divorce rate's maybe like 9 to 12% from what I had read. And the only correlation that I could find within a church setting with that relationship with God is Protestants, especially the modern churches, the one that are more geared for younger families. Right when you walk in, usually the parents have their church and the kids have their own church. With Latter-day Saints, with Catholics, with Messianic Jews, with Seventh-day Adventists, with Jehovah's Witnesses, all these smaller church congregations that are not mainstream, those divorce rates are much lower. Why? Why is that? I can't get an answer. So it just makes me wonder the example, and to see Latter-day Saints around this temple, to see the strong bonds, to see the smiles, to see the happy families together as opposed to individual happiness that I see happening so much in today's world, that really spoke to me with this visit, and I've been pondering about that. And like, I don't have an answer for this video as to why. So like, I would love to hear your comments, some healthy, faithful, fruitful, interfaith discussion where you're coming from, because if you have an answer, I'd love to hear it. We're going to end it on that. Hope you enjoyed this visit to the Bentonville, Arkansas Temple. As always, make sure to like and subscribe if you want to stay tuned for future visits. But until next time, hope you have a good one.